like a lot of things, it kind of happened by accident. A lot of things in life I find, you just follow something that happens by accident. And I was an undergraduate at Cornell, and my major really was in composition, which it's always been in my life. And I was a violinist and a pianist. I wanted to stop violin. I played the piano, but I didn't want to take lessons at the school. I had a really good teacher outside the school. So I asked them if I could just not take lessons. And they said, no, you're a major, you have to take lessons here. And so I didn't know what to do. But I found a little harpsichord off in a corner somewhere. Not a great one, but it was a harpsichord. And I convinced the university organist to teach me lessons on it. And I went through the whole well-tempered clavier and Rameau and Frescobaldi, all kinds of music. And at the end of my senior year, I applied to some conservatories but got a Fulbright grant to go to Holland, which is what I took, to go study with Gustav Leonhardt, who was the seminal figure in early music. So I did that. And after I came back from there, I went to Yale. I studied harpsichord. Got a degree in composition, but I did study harpsichord with Ralph Kirkpatrick. And when I came to Boston, I was curious about period instruments because it was just beginning in Europe. There was just one group, Concentus Musicus, which had been going and was very good, but there wasn't much. The English groups hadn't started yet or anything. Leonhardt asked me one time if I would turn pages for a recording session when he was recording all the Bach harpsichord concertos. And he had 5 string players who were all playing on Baroque instruments. And I was fascinated with that. And when I got back to the States and was out of school, I decided to get together all the people I knew who could play decently on a Baroque instrument, we ended up with about 8 people, and see what happened. And so I put together several concerts as a group, and I didn't intend to go any further, but it was a big hit. They were filled. The church where we played was filled right away. People were curious, and so I decided, okay, I'll do another season, and it just kind of went like that. It just grew like Topsy over the years. Well, I mean, my experience in Holland, especially, I played on a lot of antiques, and then when I went to Yale after that, they have a museum with some fantastic harpsichords that are restored, and I spent a lot of time on them. So I have that in my ear, so I did for a long time. I did harpsichord recitals in Europe. A lot of places in Europe and in the States too. And I spent a lot of time on earlier music than I could do with the orchestra because there weren't orchestras in the early Baroque. And spent a lot of time playing French Baroque music and all kinds of specialized things. And then I got together with these other players and we started playing together. Ralph Kirkpatrick had written the book really, on Scarlatti. And while Horowitz there was a period in his career where he was retired for 12 years. And during that, he became fascinated with Scarlatti. And he actually made recordings with Scarlatti. But he contacted Kirkpatrick and because he was a Scarlatti man and said, can I play you some and see what you think? And so during one lesson, I said to Kirkpatrick, what did it feel like to give a lesson to Vladimir Horowitz? and he was not Kirkpatrick was not a modest man. He kind of puffed up and, got very officious and said some of what he was doing was all wrong. And then he thought for a moment and he said, but it was so beautiful that I couldn't say anything. It can be very beautiful, but it's a different piece in a sense when it's played on the piano. Back when I was studying harpsichord in the 60s, early 70s, there really weren't a lot of recordings you could listen to. And there weren't performances to go to, really. And so a lot of what we learned was really out of old books about what they wrote, plus playing on the period instruments themselves, which teaches you a lot. So it was kind of primary sources in a way, and then my attitude was you learn what you can, but when you get into rehearsal or concert, that's put aside. You just respond to the music, but you've been trained to think in certain ways.
But then you forget it all,
and then you have to be free. It's a lot like a with a little child. You might occasionally say, "Don't do that. That's not good, or that's not right," and they're learning the way to behave. But as they get older, that's just part of their frame of mind, and they're freer. And so, it's like that, I think, when you learn the way we learned. Well, yeah, as I said, we started with just 8 people. So we were doing small pieces, concertos. We did do the Fifth Brandenburg, and I played a lot of harpsichord concertos and violin concertos we did. But the first big one, I suppose, there was 1 year after we were into it for maybe 8 years or something like that. I had added a chorus by then. We did the Mass in B minor. And in that same year, I actually did our first Messiah, which was the first period instrument Messiah in Boston. And I remember the Mass in B minor people, even the Globe had written about it and was wondering whether these instruments could play that music. And I thought, well, it's written for those instruments.
Yeah.
It's just a question of whether we've come along technically well enough, built up the technique to play on these instruments, music like that. And that was a big hit, and that was something that really increased our audience, got us a lot of attention.
You remember the reaction of the audience?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't. It was very strong, very
Wow.
strong. And then that's later that year we did our first opera. We did Monteverdi's Poppaea. Because as the group grew, I just wanted to expand so that we could play the entire repertoire of the Baroque, and then eventually the classical as well.
So you were thinking through the Baroque, you were heading toward classical, but you weren't going to do that right away.
Well, we did some. It was just a matter of the size of the group, what instruments were available. We had some oboists, but could they play classical oboe as well? That kind of thing. But I have to say, it wasn't according to plan. It was just each thing was, what are we curious about now? At that time, which was 1981, Messiahs were traditionally pretty slow and reverential, even though Handel never performed them in a church. They were treated that way.
I've heard you call them boring back then.
Well, yeah, for me they were. But people were devoted to going to Messiah every year. But I thought of it as a more dramatic piece.
Yeah.
And I almost feel fortunate that I did not grow up hearing the Messiah every year. So to me, when I got to it, it was another Baroque piece. And I treated it the way, the figurations, the way I would treat those figurations in any Baroque piece, and not with the baggage that was associated with Messiah at that point.
There was a lot of baggage.
So I didn't know what the reaction would be, but that wasn't my concern, and it was very strong. People loved it, and so we were asked to do it again, and then again, and I did not intend an annual Messiah, but we've done it ever since.
You got to watch what you ask for. Let's hear a little bit of it. There's such a beautiful clarity. And it feels so three-dimensional, and it makes such sense. It's like when something comes into focus, there's background and middle ground and foreground. And the words are so clear. I mean, is this, besides being a function of you as a brilliant conductor, is this in part because the instruments articulate more honestly?
There is more articulation in both with, in the style of playing, but also the instruments help that as well. And there's a kind of a transparency to the sound. You can hear the inner voices more easily. And with the chorus singing in that style with them, it's true of the chorus as well. My feeling is you want to have players and singers who are compatible with what we're trying to do and with this music, and then let them go, let them sing, and not pull them in, because that results in a performance that's tight and not so interesting.
Right. So you're freeing them.
Yeah, they should feel free. I mean, you want the right kinds of people and who have the right musical sense about this music. And of course, we talk about things or we fix things in the rehearsal, but ultimately you want to let them perform.
Do you love choral conducting as much as instrumental conducting?
I actually do, and it's odd to me because I don't have a background as a singer, or choral conductor or whatever, but I kind of grew into that, and I do love working with the chorus. Yeah. Once you have to really get things exactly right, in a performance, things happen, and and they go by, and it's not important. But in a recording, you have to really have it right, because you don't want the same misstep to happen every time you
Right,
listen to
of course,
it.
Yeah.
I think it really gave a boost also to the players, and especially because in our first year we got a Grammy nomination for that Messiah, and that was a surprise. Because
great.
we weren't politicking for it, and I think that all just gave a big boost, and it made the audience grow, because people were hearing the recordings and
Of course.
coming to concerts.
You did the first American period instrument orchestra performance of the Magic Flute, right?
Yeah, I think it was the first, yeah.
And Don Giovanni as
Don Giovanni,
well.
certainly, yeah. That was actually, I think, the first. There was one attempt at it that I heard didn't work in Sweden before, but other than that, it was the first modern day performance on period instruments of Don Giovanni.
Was that? Was there some fear in stepping into that world?
Oh, of course. I mean, I have great memories, fond memories, actually, of just immersing myself in this score and it's complex score, and just trying to go into a new territory, basically.
Right.
With this ensemble.
I picture you sitting down in the dark of night with this giant score. I mean, How do you work through it? Do you go through each part? Do you play it for yourself? Do you?
A lot of the work is silent.
In your head.
I do some playing, but it's mostly silent, and it's studying the balances, and it's also studying the structure of the piece, because you have to have the trajectory of the piece from beginning to end in order to really hold it together. Same with Messiah or any large work. to me, a lot, maybe this is because I didn't have a background as a singer, I was particularly interested in the speech quality of some of this music, which partly helped determine tempos. And also, when we speak, we might sustain a word. If I say sustain, there's it's a long A I just did, but my voice it came down during it. Sustain, that kind of thing. And that quality is a little different from a lot of what singers do, which is really sustaining the same level of a note right through. And I would tend to go for more of a speech quality, a spoken quality, where they would a voice might drop off during a long note or even increase. It just have a shape, which we do when we talk. And I think that makes it, for this music, for the Baroque music, it's not, you wouldn't want to do it in a 19th century piece. But in Baroque music, I think it really makes for the clarity of that kind of music. One of the things about doing that kind of music is that it's for our kind of orchestra and period of Baroque, classical instruments, it's late in our repertoire, and so it's pushing the orchestra in a way. It's pushing it, and Beethoven even more so. When we do Beethoven symphonies, to me, one of the qualities of Beethoven is in pushing the boundaries. And he's pushing the instruments and the whether it's a piano for a piano sonata or just to an orchestra, he's pushing them to their limits in a way. And I've always felt that, there are performances I love with modern instruments, but one quality that they don't have, even though they may be very beautiful and exciting, is they're not being pushed to the limits. Because those orchestras are designed for even later music. They can play Mahler, for example, whereas this has that tension in it that's I find very exciting.
That must be one kick to conduct that thing.
It is.
What does he take, like 5 themes and put them all together? It's like a mashup of...
Yeah. It's an amazing ending.
Turns out that your daughter is starting a period instrument orchestra. See what you've done.
I know.
So are you inclined to interfere, or is she...
Well, not interfere. I'm actually on her board.
Okay, well, that's good interference.
But I'm not performing with them. But it does feel like almost like a kind of reincarnation in a sense. I'm leaving this one, and she's up in Portland, Maine, and they just had their first concert.
How did it go?
It was great. It was a big hit. People were very excited. The audience, a big audience, and they were all very excited by it. And
wow. I've heard you say that every generation something sort of new happens, a style changes, or do you still feel that way?
Yeah, I don't know if it's every generation, but every so often. And for that reason, I've always felt that period instruments and the style of attempting to resurrect old styles of playing, they're not out of an antiquarian interest. They really are a product of our times. We like to see things and see cultures in their own terms. We don't change them all automatically into our own. And I think that's why period instruments came along in the late 20th century. So it's I've always thought of the modern, well, if you think of what we call modern instrument orchestra, it's an orchestra that mostly plays music that's, 200 years old, 150 years old, on instruments that are as old as that. So it's not modern in a sense, but I've always thought of modern instruments as electronic instruments and the resurrected early instruments because they're of our time. Nothing wrong with the older ones, but I think of it as a modern phenomenon.
Why do we react so strongly to that piece, do you think?
That particular piece? It's a beautiful piece. It's an interesting piece in that it has, unlike certain contrapuntal music that has many voices that are equal, this one has a melody, which not all Bach has a melody across the top, and then this pulse on the lower voices, and then these backgrounded middle voices that are also playing interesting things. They're not just accompaniment, but it's more in the background. It's an interesting balance, I think, in that piece, and very beautiful.
The smoothness of the tone, the straight tone, whatever you want to call that, it's not vibrating. Is so sad to me for some reason. It has a real effect because the crescendo seems so pure as it comes to us, from sort of nothing. That's something that Baroque instruments can do so much better, I think.
Well, yeah, and it's not that we don't use vibrato. We do.
Yeah.
And there's vibrato in that. It's just that it's used more as an ornament. It becomes, it helps intensify a sound, and it's not a constant where everything has a vibrato. So it's a different view of it. It's absolutely unique. He's way ahead of his time, and he almost, in places, had to invent notations to make clear what he was doing.
Really.
Every instrument, normally in a score of that period, you'll have the same dynamic up and down through the orchestra. Everybody will be marked forte, everybody will be marked piano, and then you have to balance it a little bit. But here, everyone's got something different. It's just things come in and out of focus. You just imagine the chaos of things moving around but not in any order, or just appearing, disappearing. And every once in a while something violent happens in this. It's extraordinary. Oh yeah, it's like an encyclopedia. It's got everything in it, and it's so extraordinary because it's at the beginning of the Baroque, really, and it was a period when music had changed so much that it was hard to know exactly how to organize a piece. The same thing happened, I think, 300 years later with Schoenberg. When music became atonal, the first music that was written that way was very, very short pieces. It was hard to know how to organize it. And Monteverdi had that. And here he comes up with this piece that's just enormous. I mean, this gigantic, wonderful piece that is organized by taking early music for him, the Gregorian chants, and using them as a structural element, just running through a piece, and adding onto it modern music for him. And it's just an extraordinary piece, yeah.
Did you study dance when you were studying Baroque music, or did you have to?
You have to know what the dances are and how they work. I'm not particularly a dancer myself, but you have to feel that. I mean, this particular piece with excerpt is the introduction to the piece. It's all on one note for the chorus, but it gets very complex in the later movements as well.
Incredible.
I wrote a bunch of piano pieces, and at one point my mother gave me some things that I had written even before I could, when I was younger, before I could read music, but just that made no sense at all. But I was trying to write music.
You were just
But at 6 I was studying piano, so I was writing piano music.
So that was always an instinct in you.
Yeah.
How does that help you if you're looking at a score? Does it help you to sort of figure out how the composer is thinking?
I think it does. I think you have the idea that the feeling that this music is not inevitable. It could have gone a different way. How did he get out of this spot? How does he move? And so there are surprises. There are just wonderful directions that a piece may go. But as we know from Bach, pieces could go many ways because he would not so much revise, but he'd use a piece in another setting and it would do something else. Or one of the pieces in one of those orchestral suites, he added a chorus on it, in a cantata. He just could endlessly spin it out. So there are many ways that something can go, and I think you have a sense of that as a composer when you're trying to figure out for yourself, what direction is this piece going to go? What's the next thing that I need? I certainly will be spending much more time composing. I've always done it, but it's been more in the background. I haven't tried to make a career of it, certainly it's been in a way almost living in two worlds, and now I can maybe focus more on one of them.
Yeah, there was the other Marty who was...
Yeah, in the 17th, 18th century, which I had an affinity for, and 20th century
and the
or
now
21st. I don't really know. I mean, there'll be a search, and various conductors coming in, and I think they'll have their own ideas or not. I mean, the committees will decide, about the ideas. It could go in other directions. I hope it keeps some of the culture of this organization and some of the excitement. I think it can, certainly. But it'll be interesting to watch.
You've really expanded your fan base, that's for sure. Streaming has helped that, I know.
Oh, yeah.
There's 6 continents worth of fans, right?
Right.
That might not have happened maybe if the pandemic hadn't sort of settled in on us, because you needed to get the message out somehow.
Right.
And do you feel like the message, the music, is still as powerful, even just as a stream as opposed to a live performance?
Well, a live performance, of course, has some things that can't be reproduced. But I think streaming certainly works. I mean, I've watched streams of other things as well as ours, and if it's a good quality stream, which we've been able to do here at WGBH and get very high quality, then it's wonderful. Possibly. I mean, it depends on the group and on me and where I'm at. And
Well, we are so grateful, and I am really grateful that it all happened here in Boston. I suppose it could have happened in Chicago or on your Fulbright. You could have stayed over there and abandoned us.
Yeah.
But Boston has, you've lit us up in such an important way.
Thank you.
And we are so grateful. Martin Pearlman, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I've enjoyed
It's been a
this.
pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.